Hi everyone, Dr. Matt here, and in this video we're going to go through compartment syndrome, specifically compartment syndrome relating to the extremities or to your limbs. So imagine your limbs, your legs and your arms, like suitcases. Inside these suitcases we have muscles and bones and blood vessels and nerves. Now if something increases inside the suitcase, the pressure is going to increase, which is essentially what compartment syndrome is. So in this video I'll first explain to you what the different compartments mean and what's inside them. Then I'm going to go through a pathophysiological process or a concept map which kind of steps through how the pathophysiology manifests. In doing so, I'll also explain the most common clinical manifestations or the signs and symptoms, and then also the most common causes. So let's get rolling. The first thing to think about is your limbs. So we're relating the compartment syndrome for today only the extremities. So limbs being your thighs, your gluteal, your leg, your feet, your upper limb, your forearm, your hand. These all have distinct or discrete compartments. What I mean by these compartments means they're wrapped up in connective tissue stockings or wrappings that keeps them all contained. So in the compartments, we mostly find muscle. So the compartments, the fascia, the connective tissue is really enclosing these muscles tightly. So we find muscles in there, we find blood vessels in there, we find nerves in there. And so what that basically means is the fascia, the connective tissue that wraps up the compartment, it protects it and it contains it, but if something increases inside it, it doesn't expand overly well. So it doesn't keep going bigger and bigger and bigger like other tissue would, it keeps it restricted. And as you would imagine, this kind of works with Boyle's law. As we decrease the size of the space, we increase the pressure. So it's this kind of inverse relationship. So as the volume decreases within the compartment, the pressure increases. And this is the crux of compartment syndrome. So depending on which compartment, some compartments only have two compartments, an anterior and a posterior, or a ventral or dorsal. Some will have lateral and medial compartments, others will have even more. That's not so important today. What's important is just to know that this fascia compartment is what wraps the compartment up. Inside it is mostly muscles, but also importantly we have blood vessels and nerves, and primarily the muscles and the nerves will become dysfunctional as compartment syndrome is worsens. So these compartments could be in the thigh, in the gluteal, in the leg. The leg is the most common location that we see in compartment syndrome. In the arm, the forearm is the second most, and then in the hand. Let's go through the pathophysiology now. Now, the first step that you need to consider in this pathophysiology of compartment syndrome is an increase, so I've got an arrow up here, increased intra-compartment pressure. That just means within the compartment we start to see an increase in pressure. So that's the first step, you can write that down. What would lead to an increase in pressure? Well, there can only be two things. Probably the most common is an increase in contents. So we actually have an increase in contents within the compartment. I'll get to that in a second, what they are likely to be. The other is we have a decrease in compartment volume. What that means is something is restricting it even more, so almost squashing it down. So that's a decrease in compartment volume. So either one of these will lead to an increased compartment pressure. Let's go through something that increases the content in the compartment. I'll just say in the compartment. Now, these come to the etiology. Here are the causes. The causes or etiology. The most common by far is fracture. So we have fractures. Why does a fracture lead to increase in compartment? Well, when we get a fracture, we probably get bleeding, so we start to get blood accumulating in the compartment, that increases content, or we get inflammation, and that's edema in the content. The most common location of a fracture is a tibial fracture. So about 60% of all cases of compartment syndrome in the limbs is due to a tibial fracture. So it's very common. So fractures is number one. Another one is bleeding. So we've ticked off fractures, ticked off bleeding. Bleeding could be from trauma, so trauma, motor vehicle accident or some kind of blunt trauma which ruptures a blood vessel in the compartment, bleeding, increased content, increased pressure. Or a person may have coagulopathy problems, so bleeding, spontaneous hemorrhage into that region, leading to blood, therefore contents, therefore pressure. So we've got fractures, we've got bleeding. We could also have burns. So 3rd-degree burns in a region. That injury causes edema to start to accumulate or exudate to start to fill up the compartment. That increases the pressure as well. So we've got burns. We can also, we'll tick that one off. We can have crush injuries. So in some cases, like motor vehicle accidents or industrial accidents where machinery or something is pressing on the limbs, initially that would be a decrease in compartment volume. So you could say the initial crush decreases the compartment, increases the intra-compartment pressure, but as the crush is released, so we take the crush off, we're going to also see inflammation and a whole lot of products that is caused by the injury, which then leads to contents building up in the compartment, therefore increased pressure. So crush could fit into both areas. We've also got reperfusion, so this would be ischemia, reperfusion injury. So this could be a case where a person has drunk excessive amounts of alcohol, passed out, on a park bench or something where they're pressing against the limb or on a chair or something like that, where they're pressing on the limb, causing ischemia, causing damage to the area, and when they wake up and move their limb, blood comes back and then we start to get inflammation and exudate and so forth. This can also happen in a general anaesthetic where the person under the general anaesthetic is undergoing a surgical manoeuvre and as a result of poor positioning, we've also got an ischemic kind of restriction, and then once it's been reperfused to that area, that exudate and that inflammatory response is also leading to an increase in content in that area. So you could also have reperfusion injury. Okay, so these are the most common things that can lead to increasing content within the compartment. Coming across here, the most common that leads to a decrease in compartment volume is wraps or casts. So if a person was to fracture their a bone and then they had a very tight cast in that area, that restricts the size of the compartment. That can lead to intra-compartment pressure. And so this is kind of the starting point of how the pathophysiology starts to manifest. Here are the causes. Then we go to the intra-compartment pressure. As we get an increase in intra-compartment pressure, as you probably imagine, we get a decrease in arterial perfusion. So the blood vessel that's trying to get, the arterial blood vessels that's trying to get through the compartment. So let's say the compartment here is through a tibial fracture and we get an increase in pressure at the front of the leg. So as the blood vessel is trying to get through the arterial blood vessel, it's harder to get through, so the perfusion is poorer. At the same time, because it's so pressurized in there, within the interstitial space, the venous pressure also goes up. So the venous pressure goes up, the arterial pressure goes down. What that does is it disturbs the capillary dynamics, and we start to get what we call a capillary bed failure. So the perfusion to that area is starting to diminish. This will start to lead to tissue perfusion or reduction in tissue perfusion in that area. Now, in doing so, as we start to see the dynamics in the capillary change, these are the hydrostatic pressure and the oncotic pressure forces being played around, we start to get an increase in capillary permeability. So as the blood vessels become more leaky, more fluid comes out. So we get increased in edema or exudate into that area. And as you would imagine, more edema, more compartment contents, more pressure, and this is going to be a vicious cycle. So this is just going to keep amplifying itself and amplifying itself. And as this worsens, we start to see the deterioration coming down here. So as we get decreased perfusion, we'll start to see the symptoms starting to manifest. Now, the way you can remember the clinical manifestations, the signs and symptoms, are through the P's. The 6, in this case I put the 6 P's. Sometimes people will use 5 P's, but that's fine. The first P is pressure. A feeling of pressure or tension within the actual compartment. So the person may experience that. They feel that the area is tense and pressurized, but also the clinician can feel that. So if they were to palpate or do some kind of physical examination to the compartment, they would feel it's very tough, wood-like, so tapping on wood, very, when palpating, it would feel very restricted. So that's pressure, one of the early signs. Then another early sign is pain. So pain associated with this could be for a number of reasons. As we get a reduction in tissue perfusion, we're going to start to see impacts to nerve. So the nerve running through that area, but also the muscle that's associated with the compartment. So the muscles will start to become ischemic and the nerve will start to be ischemic. Within this process, we're going to start to see lots of inflammation. That's going to be sensitizing nerves. We're going to start to see muscle injury. We're going to start to see ischemia to the nerve. All these things are listed in pain. So pain is becoming more common as it's getting worse, particularly if you stretch the area. So passive stretching adds to more pain. So that makes the pain worse. So that's again adding to your, when you're doing these clinical assessments, adding to your understanding that there could be compartment syndrome. So that's P. Another thing that goes with the ischemia associated with the nerve is paresthesia. So paresthesia is pins and needles. So you've experienced this before where you've fallen asleep on a limb, on your arm, and you've woken up and you've got pins and needles on area. That's because you've got an ischemic block to the nerve in that region. You may have also experienced this with taking blood pressure, so blood pressure cuff in your upper arm, and you start to get pins and needles in your lower forearm and your fingers. That's because you're getting ischemic, not damage, but ischemic changes to the nerve. That's causing dysfunction to the nerve, feeling like that pins and needles. So these are more early signs of compartment syndrome: pressure in the area, pain, worse on passive stretching, and paresthesia, pins and needles. As this worsens, as this cycling gets worse and worse, we're going to start to see the more later signs. So this is again due to the tissue perfusion, the pressure that's in the compartment. So the blood vessel that's trying to go through the compartment to feed the distal region, like the foot or the hand, if you were to take the pulse, like the radial pulse, the dorsal pedis pulse, or the posterior tibial pulse, you would start to see a diminished pulse. So we might see pulselessness. In doing so, we would also see that area become pale or cold. So polar, pale. Cold extremities, pale extremities, limited pulse. Again, that's due to the restriction in perfusion arterially. Now this is going to become more later, and as we start to see damage, particularly to the muscle, through the tissue and necrosis, because of the lack of blood supply, and to the nerve, ischemic damage and hypoxic damage to the nerve, we're going to start to see the last later sign is paralysis, which means the muscles aren't working from a motor standpoint. This is a much later sign. So these are the P's, that's how they fit into the pathophysiology. Now in terms of the diagnostic assessment, the gold standard assessment is to measure the pressure in the actual compartment. So there are certain devices that you can stick into the compartment and that registers the pressure in the compartment. Something in the region of 30 millimeters of pressure and beyond would be indicative of compartment syndrome, and that would have to be addressed fairly rapidly because this is a medical emergency. When we start to see the destruction of the muscles, remember muscle are cells that are just filled with lots of proteins. So if you start to see proteins like troponin or myoglobin, so if you start to see those in blood or in urine, that's indicating that the muscle is breaking down, as well as enzymes associated with muscle metabolism, such as creatine kinase. Again, if we see those in the blood or in urine output, that's indicative that we are seeing muscle changes. Now, these can be destructive to the kidneys, so that can lead to acute kidney injury and even a kidney failure. So this has to be addressed rapidly or it could deteriorate quite quickly. In terms of nerves becoming dysfunction, certain sensory evaluation like 2-point discrimination and certain other assessments can indicate the nerves are also becoming dysfunctional, and that's indicative of compartment syndrome. So there are some quick summaries on what compartment syndrome is. We've had a look at the pathophysiology, so how it actually manifests, how this pathophysiology leads to the common clinical manifestations, which are the 6 Ps, which can be both early and late, and how these common causes lead to either an increase in content within the compartment or a decrease in compartment volume, which ultimately leads to the increased pressure and then the whole vicious cycle that makes the matter worse. Important to note that this is a medical emergency and has to be addressed immediately through surgical intervention, which is usually an opening to the fascia or a fasciotomy, which releases the pressure and allows the clinician to address the cause of it and then hopefully healing without certain damage that is irreversible. So there you go. Hopefully this has helped and your understanding of compartment syndrome is now better.
Hi everyone, Dr. Mike here. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. We've got hundreds of others just like this. If you want to contact us, please do so on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter and TikTok at Dr. Mike Todorovic, at DrMikeTodorovic. Speak to you soon.